All right. Now we're going to get into part 2. Cyberspace Battlefield. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Historically, there were only two war-fighting domains, land and sea. Land is simply the area where the combatants fought. Now, over time, there were developments in weapons, like the Greek fire, which is a pretty cool weapon, shot fire from a ship. Anyway, these developments would give one side or the other an advantage, but they would face each other on the field of battle. Then the sea became both a separate warfighting domain and a part of the land domain. The maritime domain includes the oceans, seas, bays, estuaries, islands, coastal areas, and the airspace above these, including what are referred to as the littorals. What's a littoral? Excellent question. Littorals have two operational environments: seaward, which is the area from the open ocean to the shore, which must be controlled to support operations onshore, and landward, their area inland from the shore that can be supported and defended directly from the sea. Ships would fight battles to both control the sea and support land battles. And as technology continued to influence the battlefield, airplanes were introduced. Now you might be wondering, why are we going through this? Well, okay, so we're talking about cyber warfare, and what's important for you to understand is how cyber warfare is an evolution, is part of a historical evolution of warfare in general. So sit back, relax, and chill out. Anyway, now the air domain is in the atmosphere, beginning at the surface of the Earth and extending to the altitude where its effects upon operations become negligible. Meaning, in other words, as far as high as we can fly an airplane or shoot a missile. The first airplanes were used for reconnaissance, but were soon armed and fought both air-to-air and air-to-ground engagements. Obviously, you should probably know. If you don't know, that's messed up. That would be World War I, where the first serious air combat occurred. Then warfare reached space. Space is the environment corresponding to the space domain, where electromagnetic radiation, charged particles, and electric and magnetic fields are the dominant physical influences. And that encompasses the Earth's ionosphere and magnetosphere, blah, 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 interplanetary space, and the solar atmosphere, meaning the stuff that comes off the sun. Now, this was a unique domain as it was used by other domains rather than a domain where combat was fought, though at some point it will become another battlefront. Now, what does that all mean? Meaning that, so for example, in the 70s we had Skylab, which was the first space station that was the first NASA space station. Actually, the Russians had something before then. Anyway, if you really think it was just about experiments and science for the sake of science, then, well, not so much. There was a CIA component, and it took lots of great photographs, as it turns out. And they had a really cool mechanism for dropping the canisters with the photographs down to Earth and stuff. So did the Russians. They had their own version. Now, finally, cyberspace became so vital to the warfighters, it was declared a domain. It is a global domain within the information environment consisting of the interdependent network of information technology infrastructures, otherwise known as cyberspace, which includes the internet, telecommunications networks, computer systems, and embedded processors and controllers. In other words, all the hardware and stuff that makes all the computers and networks work. Modern commanders depend on it and are largely actively studying how to fight and win the next war on it. Now, we're going to get into a little bit about different domains and history of how they developed and are linked potentially with cyber, and we're going to start with land. So a phrase that you might sometimes see in some of the readings refers to something called RMA, or Revolutions of Military Affairs. Now, as we look back at the progression of warfare on land, we see that there have been many revolutions of military affairs. The rock gave way to the club, which was beat out by the spear, and then the bow, horse-mounted soldiers, and even truly in Russia, they had bear-mounted soldiers back in the days of the Cossacks, like the 9th century, and even up until the 1900s, these types of soldiers were actually used in battle. Believe it, it's true. Horse-mounted soldiers had an advantage over ground troops, and then the stirrup gave them a tremendous advantage, and etc., etc. Guns and artillery increased the rate at which armies could kill each other, as well as the effective range and the speed, etc. Then came the tank and machine gun, and each of these RMAs changed how armies fought. New doctrines, tactics, and organizational structures had to be developed. Should we integrate these new weapons into every unit or build a unit of pure machine guns, tanks? Good question. The decision was tank units should consist of tanks by themselves, but the machine gun should be integrated into every unit. And the decision to make tank units of pure tanks has been reversed since that time. Today, the tank is normally integrated with infantry to form combined arms task forces, so the commander can leverage each unit's strengths. Now, these historical lessons in transformation, really should be studied in order to find out how most efficiently develop methods of fighting in cyberspace. But are they? In many ways, moving on to the sea, in many ways, the sea is an analogous battlefield to cyberspace. Like cyberspace, it is a large area where ships can easily move without detection, so the defender has the challenge of detecting where the threat is. No one side can sufficiently control it. The criminal elements operating on the internet are comparable to the pirates of old who would interdict and influence the lines of commerce. Arrgh. That's pirate talk. Anyway, there were eventually international agreements developed to deal with these threats. Another example we can draw from the Navy is the development of the flat top or aircraft carrier. For years, the battleship, as you can see here, the U.S. battleship Ohio is pictured, was the measure of a nation's sea power, but the introduction of the flat top or aircraft carrier caused a paradigm shift, and soon strategies, doctrines, and tactics were built around it. Most senior officers had built their careers around the battleship in those days, and the defense industrial base was heavily investing in the battleship, so they strongly resisted the transformation. They refused to see the need to change based on a new capability. And there's a reason why I'm bringing this up, because there's a parallel here with cyberspace, which we'll get into here in a second. This cultural blindness is impacting the transformation to computer network operations in many of today's organizations, not just the military, but beyond. At the tactical level, many security professionals still base their strategies on outdated technologies, even though the industry and the battle space have transformed and evolved. They are still focused on perimeter defenses and ignore the mobile devices being used by their workforce. At the senior leadership level, the lack of understanding of the technology and its implications in some organizations are impeding the development of doctrine to fight the next war. Nowadays, we have commanders who have grown up with the idea that weapon systems must be based on their ability to put what's referred to as steel on target, like a torpedo in a ship, like you see here. This is through a periscope, obviously, right? The idea of a weapon system that doesn't destroy something via what's referred to as a kinetic attack is viewed as ridiculous. However, they also don't feel that their real weapon systems like jets, like you see pictured here, or tanks, should be considered part of the virtual battlefield because they are simply enabled with computer chips, despite the fact that they can be hacked into and modified. Oh yes. They believe that non-kinetic attacks are something that would only be an annoyance, like their email going down, not part of a battlefield engagement. These are the same professionals that study history and understand transformation, but struggle to understand the technology running the systems they depend on. It is a challenge because they are steeped in tradition and have studied warfare based on the weapons that existed when they were junior officers and still in the field, as opposed to nowadays. Thus, it's a constant struggle to understand the changes that technology is bringing to the battlefield. Air power is similar to cyber power because it is a domain dominated by technological advances. Early on, there were major leaders developing strategies, doctrines, and tactics. For example, General Giulio Douhet. He was an Italian officer who was one of the first real theorists, whatever. All right, I'm done with the fake Italian accent. Supporting the use of air power. He felt that there was no defense against bombers. It would terrorize populations into surrender, and he advocated the use of explosive, incendiary, and poison gas bombs against population centers, as everyone contributes to the total war effort, so everyone is a legitimate target. The general was court-martialed eventually for his outspoken beliefs. Billy Mitchell is considered the father of American air power. He came into World War I as a lieutenant colonel in the Army and ended up controlling all U.S. Air Forces. He is a controversial figure because of the disagreements he had with the Army leadership over using air power against battleships, and was court-martialed for insubordination. His passion for how air power could be used was key to the development of Air Force capabilities. Both these general officers, the Italian and the American, understood the potential for air power and pushed for innovation at the expense of their careers. Both eventually had their court-martials overturned and are considered heroes. We have not seen anyone with that level of forward-thinking theories and dedication for cyber warfare in today's military yet. Now, space is very comparable to cyberspace in that it is generally considered an enabler to the other domains. It provides communication paths for most long-haul communication systems, meaning like AT&T and Verizon, what have you. Command and control, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, navigation with GPS systems, phones, radios, television, financial transactions, and surveillance for wide area reconnaissance, weather, mapping, and commercial imaging, such as Google Maps. The George C. Marshall Institute produced a great series called A Day Without Space, which lays out all the impacts, and space provides some great examples on how to integrate a new technology into the armed forces. Space started as a military-dominated domain that has transitioned to a commercial market, just like cyber operations. What do you mean? Well, it's a technology that integrated into the other domains to the point they are dependent on it. It is an area that requires unique skills, so the management of the workforce presents a challenge. It takes time to build senior leaders for a new technology, and as the commercial demand takes off, the competition for the workforce gets fierce. It's very hard to retain skilled operators in cyberspace-related fields. Now, what does that all mean? Well, okay, you have a picture here from the 1960s. Back in the day, except for very few corporations like the IBM and a few others, it was really only the governments who had the capital to actually build out large technology systems like this mainframe system. By the way, the amount of technology that you see in that room is not even a quarter or a tenth of what's in your basic cell phone nowadays. But the point is, back then, in order to work on these kind of systems, you had to work for the government or some other large corporations. Nowadays, yay, Google! This is one of Google's offices. They're known as Googleplexes, and they're pretty innovative workspaces. These are little sub-meeting rooms, which is nice. They look like little gondolas and what have you. And there's a little alien. That's so cute. Yeah, I mean, basically, this is who's competing for the brain talent is the private sector. And, of course, you also have those who go into the hacktivism realm as opposed to working for governments, what have you, or large corporations. So, basically, the long short of it is cyber is ubiquitous in all the other modern domains, meaning it's so present that we only notice it when it's not there. Matter of fact, there's a quote from I don't know if he still is, but he was at one point the Air Force Chief of the Warfighting Information. So anyway, I think that kind of says it all. There you go. Now, when we talk about the cyber domain, some will say it is limited to the hardware that runs the military networks, like computers and routers and firewalls, whatnot. Others will say it refers to the military networks and the supporting infrastructure. A few others believe it's all government systems. Still others feel it is all the systems connected to the internet, which includes both private and government systems. Now, as we look for precedents, we can see maritime law could be used. or international space treaties could apply, or maybe we could develop a cyber manifest destiny, and this image relates to manifest destiny. If you don't know what manifest destiny, I'm shaking my head. Look it up, because yeah, just look it up. All right. Some of the answers are overly simple or fit within current legal rules, but ignore the reality of how interconnected these systems are. The problem is complex, and much like defining the boundaries in an insurgency conflict, it may require different answers for different audiences. This domain is in need of theorists, strategists, doctrine, and tactics that will shape the domain, and cyber war itself is scoped to include and exclude. Next, we're going to get into the threat escape in battlespace. Good times.